Hi, Jim. How are you today?
I'm doing well. And you?
Very well, very well. Thank you, thank you. I enjoyed our last conversation on AI immensely. We touched on many things that are known now and many things that we will see in 2020. So naturally today, when we're gonna talk about value of dark data, I'm excited to hear the pearls of wisdom because many people kind of combine in their minds AI, big data, dark data, fast data. Can you please begin with certain definitions so we know that we're all on the same page with our audience today? Thank you.
Yes, and you're going to find that they overlap. So big data is the largest category, and that's the data that you're picking up as part of you doing business. And there's more and more data. It's more fine-grained. It used to be we were only interested in, large blocks of operational data. Now we're interested in the data that, how our customer behaves, what their response is socially, what events are going on in and around our processes and in around our company. So big data is gathering all that data that maybe didn't seem important to operate your transactions, but now will become important because it talks about how people are feeling about your transactions, about your company, and what they're saying about it. And there's a lot of big data, and it's getting bigger every day. In fact, it's growing so fast, people can't manage it. And it's being driven by the fact that we can get a lot of data cheaply, and we have a lot of processing power cheaply. And I think I would say big data has exploded, but I think it's going to explode even more with quantum computing coming on the horizon, with all the forms of parallelism. And now all of a sudden the calculation isn't in the critical path of understanding and leveraging this data. So let's have some more data. So big data is what it's described. It's large amounts of data that may or may not directly point to your organization, but may be of interest because there may be some opportunities or threats in that data that have nothing to do with the transactions that you're processing as an organization. So that's big data. Let's talk about fast data.
Let's.
Fast data is data that is operating in real time or even faster. It could be out on the edge and devices. It could be out on the edge and with robots and bots. There could be activity that's going on the edge. You could have some bots out there bidding on work, and how those bots are looking at the opportunity. That's new, rich, fast data that you didn't have before. So the notion of, independent agents, bots that are acting on the edge, and some of those may be owned, some may not be owned. That data is coming at the company very fast because it's near real time, if not real time, happening in nanoseconds. So that's fast data. Now, what's dark data? Well, dark data is data that you aren't paying attention to. So you have, groups of data that you use in your everyday business, and that's what would be known data, not dark data. So there's light on that data. People are analyzing it. People know about it. They may have more of it than they can handle, in that it's too big and too fast, but they know about it. What's dark data? Dark data is the data that's occurring in and around doing these normal business transactions, events that you're not paying attention to. It doesn't seem important. It doesn't seem to guide your business, doesn't change your guardrails, doesn't change your rules. You think. So you think. So dark data is data that's in the shadows, so to speak, in and around your business events and operations. But there's another class of dark data that is associated to neighboring contexts. So it might be a near market. It might be an industry that you don't normally pay attention to, but you ought to. So a real concrete example is I worked for a life insurance company, and for the love of God, I couldn't get top management to say, you know, it's just not lives we're dealing with people's, you know, pocketbooks. So we should become a financial network. We should offer investments. We should offer things for, you know, the full life cycle, not just birth and death. Let's talk about what's happening in the middle, people having savings for their own retirement, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So knowing that, you know, either top management had it in their mind or they didn't. Well, they started looking at the data and they started looking at how their customers were behaving, and they realized they were leaving money on the table. And there's nothing more scary to a businessman, and particularly a CPA, to leave money on the table. And so consequently, there's dark data in and around your organization that might put you in another business or cause you to buy another business, or is a new up and coming, industry even. So for instance, who would have thought in the tech field that RPA would be so strong? It was a failed sector back in the 90s, and now it's come back with a vengeance, and you know, it's a gateway drug for automation. Some people say it's a gateway drug for AI. I'm not sure about that just yet. I haven't seen that. I mean, I think if AI fails on its own, that's where it will go. It'll hide itself in RPA and hide itself in automation. But I don't see that happening with the case studies that I see coming across my desk these days, or I should say, coming across my computer.
Some of the examples, Jim, I'm glad you mentioned, because I've seen some of the examples of dark data as customer information, log files, raw survey data, just some of the examples that people collect and, hey, never get the priority and right people, tool, resources get to, right? Other things, even account information, notes of presentations, old versions of relevant documents. So all this kind of burden, right, that sits out there in taking company resources, okay? So would you like to go into what would you recommend to do and where would people start and for what reason, what's in there, kind of, yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about why dark data is important, then we'll get into the how-tos. Mm-hmm. So dark data is important because it contains secrets that could really help you. It could really help you do more business, better business, smarter business. So, you know, so all the things that you mentioned are important. So we're seeing some of that come together. So you mentioned a lot of data about customer data. Mm-hmm. So when people start looking at customer journeys, they're starting to pick up the emotions, the surveys, what customers are thinking, what their goals are, because you have on one end the company goal, on the other end you have the customer goal. Guess what? They don't match.
Not matching.
So companies are digging out and finding out what customers really want. I mean, I think all companies do the Band-Aid approach of let's make our customer experience a little bit better, make some more money while we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And, let's not scare them off. Well, that's no longer good enough. Yes, a great customer experience is fun. It's something that you ought to do. If you don't, your competitors will wipe you out quickly. But the idea of collecting information that's hidden in the journey itself, I mean, that's a great example of where dark data has benefits. You can find out, maybe the emotional stuff isn't so important, but maybe the whole end-to-end journey is. So most companies have a myopic view that a customer's journey starts at their doorstep and ends at their doorstep. Well, guess what? It doesn't. If I'm going to, try to plan a trip, and let's say you're an airline organization, all you're going to really care about is my air experience. Get a ticket, make sure the air part works, and you might point me to some partners that will rent me cars and give me some extra, points, or a hotel that might give me some extra points. That isn't what I want. I want a whole vacation or trip planned for me in context of what my goals are. So let's say I'm a neurotic flyer, which happens to be true. There's certain things that you can suggest for me as part of my journey to be less neurotic, to be more comfortable.
I'm curious. Yeah.
Well, so for instance, if you're neurotic and you're worried about flying, you're worried about the actual airplane and flight, so you can give them information about the flight and what's going on in their context, what's going on in their destination, what's going on in the air, what's going on in all the airports. Now I have to go on different apps and figure that out myself, now don't I?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm waiting on the tarmac, you're not giving me any information at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I get on my phone, probably not supposed, because it's supposed to be off, but I'll go check and see what's happening in airports around the area. You don't know if there was a crash in, at that airport or in that region that's choking everything up, or there's bad weather. So the notion of a traveler wanting to know all kinds of information is not offered by the airlines in any way, shape, or form. It also includes the people that are doing hotels. They tell me a little bit, but when I get there, I got to find what I want to eat, and whatever I happen to be hungry for at the moment. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if your hotel would tell you, here are your options, and here's some good Italian, here's some good French, and here's the different price ranges, here's how they're rated. Instead, what I get is buy from my restaurant, which is the most expensive, and well, of course, it's great because it's us.
It happens to be closed, right? When the time of your arrival and all the time you're staying there, right? It happens to be off hours. So yeah.
Exactly. If it's off hours, you will look for somebody that will deliver a cold, humble pizza.
Well done that. Yep.
Yeah. So the notion of having data that's sitting in the shadows in darkness, based on what my goals are as a customer or as an employee, those are all really good things for companies to investigate. Like you said, look at the log records. Let's mine the log records to find out if we can do better automation. I mean, that's a simple way to do things, and it pays back. The accountants are happy. If you can keep the grubby money out of their hands only and allocate some of it for future projects, that would be great. Because they want to put it all on the bottom line, get that stock price up or whatever that happens to be, or please the CEO. So looking at the dark data has a lot of benefits. Now, here's the quandary. I got all this dark data, big and fast. Should I look at it all? Should I turn it over to AI and have AI sort it out for me? Well, the answer is no.
Interesting. I did not expect that one. Okay, because now AI is the answer to all my problems. So tell me, what do you think instead of AI?
Yeah, well, here's what you need to do. You need to start off, and this gets into what drives what. Is our world data driven? Is it process driven?
Mm-hmm.
Is it AI driven? Is it algorithm driven? No, it's goal driven. And you need to keep your eye on the prize, and that's the business and customer outcomes that you're willing to come up with. Since they are opposed, you have to find somewhere in the middle where they kind of balance. I'm going to get my corporate goals, my customer's going to get some of their goals. It's not just completing a transaction. As a customer, that's the last thing that I think is important, is completing your transaction, which is your view of my world. Oh, thank you. And so the whole idea of having goals drive where you should look at dark data. Is this data related to one of my goals? Is it related to an important decision? Does data drive decisions, or do decisions drive data? I think decisions drive data. I think goals
I
drive
would
data.
say both, but okay, elaborate, please. Yeah, how this.
Well, I mean, if you're just looking at data for data's sake, and you're one of these prospectors, and let's say you're prospecting for gold. I live in Arizona. Arizona has lots of gold, has lots of copper, has lots of silver. It has all kinds of wonderful resources. So if I go around and I start sifting sand in my backyard looking for gold, what do you think the chances?
Why not?
Well, why not? Because it's not going to deliver anything. I would rather go, into Superstition Mountains, or I'd rather go up to Bisbee, or where it's a known gold thing. And if my goal is, I want to try the process of panning, well, then maybe my pool in the backyard works. But if my goal is to discover gold and make some money, then I'm going to go to the rich areas that I think are going to be important. So having the goals guide where you start looking at the dark data and the big data and the fast data is more important than anything else. Now, you may be, and that's when you're in planning mode. There's also what is known as react mode, which sometimes I find myself into when I get a request from my wife or one of the kids. Didn't think about that, so you got to react fast. Same thing with business. If you're going to search the data, you got to research it around the scope of the problem that you're dealing with. Where's the hot poker coming from, and where is it touching you? And so the idea of hotspot or problem-centric discovery of dark data is important. So, for instance, healthcare organizations, are starting to get paid different ways. They're getting paid on how well they follow their process.
Right.
So in other words, if you're submitting to Medicare, it's how well you did the administrative process. It doesn't make any difference whether you cured the patient or not. It's did you follow the process? Well, looking at data, dark data around the process, since that's what you're getting paid on, is highly important. If you have taken an oath to cure mankind, then you're going to look at the outcome from the patient's perspective. We really need to look at both. So there might be a hotspot where a patient wasn't cured. You put him through the normal regimen, didn't work. You tried another one, didn't work. You try another thing, didn't work. Then you go on to a more sophisticated test. The test shows you more data. Well, there's some dark data. Oh, your MRI says, oh, your spine is squeezing in on your nerve. Oh, no wonder your foot's falling asleep. Well, let's see if we can fix that. So the notion of having hotspot dark data is important. The MRI data for me was not important until the regular routines didn't work. Anti-inflammatories, took some pain pills, but still I've got pain and my foot's falling asleep on me by the end of the day. What's going on here? And so you might, in the dark data from the MRI, figure out what's really going on. Oh, wow, you need very specific stretching exercises, or we'll put you on a upside down rack, I call it, where they hang by your feet. So there's dark data around plans, and there's dark data around reactions and an evolving, emerging set of problems. And so what's important for planning is one thing. What's important for emergent problems, and by the way, we're moving into more and more emergent problems. When we have contexts touching each other, when we have certain things happening, there's a set of emergence out there. So more and more dark and fast data will become important. And the companies that beat other companies to the edge where that data is first sensed are the ones that are going to be much more successful. I mean, we see what Uber and Lyft have done to the taxi business. They're out on the edge. Now they got problems out on the edge in that, they have nasty people they pick up, and some of the drivers have gotten nasty, and we've heard the bad stories. So now we need more data about them. Mm-hmm. So now we don't want you to get into the wrong vehicle because nasty people are ghosting the Uber and Lyft riders. We're going to give you an ID. Well, that ID didn't exist. That was not only dark data, it was non-existent data. So organizations are going to have to deal with dark and non-existent data. Let me ask you a question. Do you have a profile that speaks on your behalf, all your preferences in every context in your life, available and secure that companies can look at?
No.
No, none of us do.
No.
No,
yeah.
No. Could we have that?
Yeah.
I think someday we will. I just hope it's not run by the government.
That's whole another set of ethical considerations. Okay. Yeah. So for me, if we're touching the subject, then I'm kind of need to know basis person. Meaning if I find my local shoe store, okay, needing to know what is it that interests me, absolutely, they're helpful, I know them well, I'm comfortable, I'm their customer, okay? But at the same time, Amazon, I have no problems them sending my recommendations because, hey, they know something about me, not everything, but something, all right? But I'm always tracking and kind of always, not always, okay? But in a way that where I can, where it makes sense for me, okay? Because first of all, I don't want to be bombarded by unrelevant offers and this kind of customer behavior. I'm trying to protect my own life from, interactions I don't want. Exactly. Nothing wrong with that.
So some data should remain dark is what you're saying.
Some data, you see, as open as we all are, okay? Some data, I don't mind, to have my life somewhere with people I actually prefer to have my life with, right? Not with the entire world. But at the same time, I myself, I'm an incredibly, grateful customer of, again, YouTube content, okay? How well, for my taste, they figure out what is it that would interest me next. I mean, those kind of things, good for them. I don't feel intruded. I don't feel that they really pushing something on me. So far, so good. So all I'm saying, it's all about how well you're trying, right? And I will be very grateful if you're helpful to me as a company.
Okay? Right. So that talks about the intersection of your goals and their goals.
Exactly.
Finding that sweet spot and that balance.
Here we go. And the best ones know, all right, without actually making me thinking, oh, is it too spooky? Is it too much? They know about me. Those kind of things. So.
Yeah, and there's some things I don't want anybody to know, like my age or weight,
For instance, okay, and other people, by the way, we're also human, we're also different. Other people love to talk about their weight, their age, what they ate for breakfast today, where are they going this moment. Hey, wonderful, be your own boss, right? So,
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and then there's going to be a lot of data that's going to start to emerge as AI detects our emotions during interactions. So, we'll have digital assistants that'll be listening and saying, and maybe even people that look at facial recognitions and say, ooh, I can see Jim's kind of nervous there. He's kind of
That's scary. That's scary. Okay. We expect a lot about it, right? But guess what? When I'm on my walk and my neighbor tells me, something bothering me? Is something bothering you? What's wrong with you this moment? I'm saying, hey, no. I want to talk to the bot, not you. I don't want you to see anything on my face. Am I that transparent? So all saying with technology reading our emotions and what's going on in our mind, Yeah, that's for me great area still.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where the wall goes up. Yeah, and I think you're going to see some companies that will be listening in on the conversations because they listen in and they'll tell you that they're going to record it.
Mhm.
So if they tell you they're doing that, they can be listening to your voice, your inflections, and maybe give advice to the customer service person that's servicing you. I mean, not every customer service person has great EQ. Not everyone is, interested in what you want. They are tasked to get you off the phone as soon as possible, right? We know that.
That's the goal, by
Um,
the way. That's their goal, right? To get to the
exactly.
next customer as soon as possible. Yep.
Yeah. I wanna hang up on you and consider you
Yeah.
done. And so, they can, if they can sense frustration, then maybe the goals change. Maybe management says, oh, this person's frustrated. They get an extra 17 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it happens to be. So we're going to see, and I would consider all that data dark today.
Mhm.
Um,
Still, right, despite all the efforts, because even, I've heard throughout my career, last 5, 7, 8 years, okay, importance of getting into customer reaction, emotional, the personalized, customized even service, right? It's still, of course, very much driven by scripts, by procedures, processes,
right,
which is wonderful.
right.
So, but yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, and as a customer, when I know somebody's on a script and not listening to me, it makes me want to go someplace else. So I
Exactly.
mean, how do you capture that?
Mhm.
Oh, this guy's getting irritated. I think like a millennial. If you don't service me, I'm going someplace else. And that's how the millennials think. You're not going to take care of me. I'll find somebody else who will. And so companies now have to deal with that. And I think that way myself. I've always thought that way. Um, you know, Loyalty is important, and there's certain companies that I like, but if they mistreat me, I'm gone.
Yep, and add to that on the millennial example, we're talking about speaking with people, servicing us as customer service reps, right? Kids, young people today, hey, they don't even interact with people anymore. It's right, it's bot, it's a service that, hey, this click and I'm yours, and this click and I'm gone. Really, even talking on the phone with customer service, it's a luxury in their lives, and I totally understand, right? So that's
Yeah,
kind of next. Yeah.
yeah. I have 7 children, and
Wow.
some of them only text me.
Here we go. Here we go. Absolutely. So all I'm saying, this is absolutely new world, and those children growing up to be young men, right, and people who will be having their own families, and they will be forming their own universes of people around them, right? So even what customer service script will be outdated before we know it,
Yeah,
right?
and that's why it's important to keep track of trends and goals and dark
Yeah.
data because those things will start to emerge. So each industry is going to get hit different ways. If you have, a highly interactive product versus, a commodity that you're just selling, and
Exactly.
all you care about is tracking. And there's a lot of really good organizations that are good at tracking and making sure you get your device. I mean, my Keurig coffee maker broke.
Hmm.
And if you're in the IT business and you don't have coffee and pizza, you're dead. So I became quite desperate, and thank goodness I belonged to an organization that could overnight me my new Keurig. So now I could have coffee, so we could have this discussion this morning. So
Very good.
yeah,
Very
that
good.
happened over the weekend. I ordered it on Friday, and it came on Sunday.
Wonderful. Ha,
So
wonderful. Jim, going back to how to, right? So I think we talked about the importance, right? We
mhm.
gave some good examples, relatable, hopefully, right? But now how, where to start and why to start? Because again, it becomes all about priorities. It's becoming,
Well,
right? Yeah.
again, you go back to your goals,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the overarching drivers. So if you're a knowledge-rich company, you're going to focus on the knowledge-rich data. So the key piece is to understand what kind of data it is. How do you categorize it? Is it knowledge rich? Is it operational rich? Is it fast? Is it slow? Does it say something about who you do business with? So the first step is understanding the types and categories of data that you have. So once you have that and you've figured it out, and obviously there's going to be some overlap, but if you can categorize it some way, even in some kind of simple ontology, that would be helpful. And then you have to link that to the goals. Once you link the data as a contributor to the goal, then you can come up with rules on what you want to do with it. So, can I sense patterns from it? Oh, sure. Yeah, that's cool. How much time should I spend on that? Well, don't spend too much time. Can I make a decision on this data? Is this data clean enough? Is it rich enough? Is it ready for data? Is it ready for a computer program to make a decision?
Mm-hmm.
Can I code it in my hard-coded rules? Probably not. But could I advise a manager to make a certain decision based on this context, on this day, with this data? So once you match your rules to your data types and sources, you can make up rules that help people that have to deal with that. So some people shouldn't be taking action on data because if they took action on that data, they might violate the corporate principle and not realize it. And so having things linked to corporate principles, opportunities, threats, and guardrails and goals, you have to make up some rules about the data and what people can do with it. And it might be skill-based, and that leads into a whole different topic, which I'm sure we're going to hit on.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to ask some of your analysis vendors to say, well, we've got this kind of data. What do other people do with it? And if you have a data scientist that has experience, so let's say, you're working for an insurance company and you have a bunch of really smart egghead actuarials. They might know what other companies are doing with actuarial data, and you're getting more actuarial data that helps you, make decisions. Well, that's pretty simple. So categorizing the data, coming up with how they link to your goals, coming up with the rules as to what people should do with this data. Doesn't mean they can't, but they got to bring it to an authority and prove to them, hey, there's some really rich data here. It could really help us take some actions. We could actually automate it. We could have an unsupervised AI bot do it. It's important to know and have some control over what's happening, but letting people self-discover, and make the case.
This brings us naturally, I think, to next topic of skills and tools. Okay, because what we talked about is kind of soft prep right now, right? Identifying the areas that are important for your business, identifying priorities, you're gonna approach the data, right? You're identifying goals, why you're approaching this data, right? With certain goals in mind. So now, what are the skills we think will be needed and the tools?
Yeah, I think that skill thing is shifting. So it used to be you had to have a data scientist who knew about that kind of data and knew about the algorithms that are typically used, and they are very bright, very expensive, and very rare. Well, companies can't afford to do that anymore. And this is true of any new area. New areas start off with what I would call the high priests or priestess of a particular area. They know it well, and the next thing a company has to do is get them to share it. And so what we're seeing is that sharing is starting to go on, and the trickle-down theory in terms of knowledge management and understanding and making decisions on data is starting to happen. In fact, we're starting to see data science platforms pop up. Now,
Good,
these
good,
data
good. I'm
science,
glad you bring this up
yeah,
because I was on point actually of data scientists. If you're not a PhD, stay away from the data, stay away from the area, okay? And how many PhDs can humankind generate in any single moment, okay? So I'm so glad you brought up the trickling down approach, and it's trickling down what knowledge, expertise, is it through tooling or there's more? Because we know legions of talented programmers and engineers who are ready to take on those tasks. But
right.
like you said, they're being guarded from all this ambitious kind of ivory tower approach. No, this is for data scientists only. And by the way, from my experience, what I understand is happening now that data scientists, it's not a science in a way that it's not a process like development process is right now for building software platforms. This is still very much an art kind of area where nobody's even allowed to peek when these wonderful gurus on in those towers, right, kind
Yeah,
of deciding. So there's
yeah.
whole mystery about it, okay? So
Well,
please share what you think is going to happen with this trickling down and popularization of knowledge and skills. So again, it will serve better the companies and the customers, of course.
yeah, and there are new data science platforms that are going to the masses.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, companies like TIPCO, like IBM, like information builders, like informatics. I mean, SaaS. I mean, there are a number of companies that want to get more people to use the data.
Mm-hmm.
Now, assuming that this is data that's related to the goals and people aren't just playing. There's some good data discovery by playing, but you don't want just play. You want some real results. So assuming they're guided by goals, guided by what rules that we've set up that say that's okay, we can move it away from the ivory tower, particularly if we give them guardrails and help. So these data science platforms are going to make the ability to leverage algorithms in real time in multi dimensions to watch it, to turn it, to twist it, to try it. That's happening. And I'm very excited about that because now you're giving power to the people on the front lines. You're enabling the employees, you're enabling the customers. Because if you don't and you have a choke point, you're going to end up in the same situation that we are with other things. So let me give you an example of knowledge management. Now, knowledge management, there was some guru that decided that the knowledge was great and decided that new knowledge could only be added to the knowledge taxonomy once it was blessed. Well, what happened to that? Totally failed, right? Well, now that we've got ontologies and we've got data science platforms, now the knowledge ontology can grow. In fact, some companies are scraping knowledge out of manuals. They're scanning in forms and the knowledge is getting sucked out using NLP and ontologies. And now the knowledge can be used and given to other people on the line. Hey, well, look, and there was a company that I wrote a case study on where they had all kinds of information about pumps because they were good at building infrastructure, and pumps were a key piece of all infrastructure. You got to pump air, you got to pump sewage, you got to pump water. Pumps are it. They weren't quite pumps or us, but they were giving guidance to people that were designing pump systems and a complete architecture by reading all the manuals, using NLP, categorizing it, and showing the knowledge. So that and at the end they brought up videos about particular pumps, and then they started rolling it out to the maintenance people, saying, "Look, another person that was in this situation, this is what they did." So now you're taking that knowledge, that dark data. Well, it wasn't quite dark. It was known, but it was in a dark corner. It was in the shadows, wasn't important. And now you're making it important. The same thing is going to happen with data science. the gurus that are blessing everything, well, they'll still have their thing, but everybody else is going to be able to get at the data. It becomes democratized and leveraged and used by us dweebs. And I don't mean you that way. I mean me.
Pretty much, because in my own professional experience, hey, I was physicist slash scientist, okay. But when I realized that the United States of America, where I moved right after college graduation, okay, which was good time in my life, I realized that hey, I can easily transfer everything I know, not particular skill, but kind of the background I have, into becoming an application programmer. SQL, Oracle opened up my life to completely different level in a way that I remember assembler. I remember IBM 360. I remember interesting even C coding, okay, C programming, which I've done for a little bit, but it did not excite me. What excited me is new set of tools that actually draw someone like myself, kind of ambitious new professional, into world of database management. Relational databases was coming up at the time, right? So SQL changed my life because I could operate relational database entities and actually having fun with it. Okay. Yep. So I'm waiting to see how what data scientist platforms, how they're gonna propagate to the new waves of able professionals, and yeah, that will make a big
difference. They're going to enable professionals, and they're going to let companies work out to the edge. So a lot of them are working on things that work on digital twins or the IoT edge, combining that with algorithms and combining that with data at the edge with freedom levels. Okay, you're at the edge, you have freedom level 0. You just let me know when something happens, okay? Mm-hmm. And then there's other ones that are going to have freedom levels. Well, you can decide if you don't go beyond these guidelines. And then there'll be other ones that say, hey, go ahead and decide. This is not a critical thing. If you have to get through, go ahead. So you have a very high freedom level. So that's what it's going to do. It's going to enable the technology to get smarter and freer. It's going to enable people to get smarter and freer, freeing up big, fast, and dark data. I believe is going to be the thing that's going to happen over the next 5 years, and these data science platforms will be part of it. And we're going to see data science being embedded in other kinds of digital business platforms, whether they're application oriented. You see Salesforce adding more analytics. You see Microsoft CRM embedding more analytics and more freedom to analyze. We see in some of the process vendors, mm-hmm. like Pegasystems and Appian. We see it in IBM, with their decision management capabilities. All of this stuff is headed towards supercharging the individual to help the company and to help the customer.
Oh, vive la individual. All right. So yeah, this is great. This is great, Jim. So that's exactly the point I wanted to hit in our discussion today. Very informative for me. So hopefully some value for you, sharing the wisdom. So the summary, right? Because what I understand about dark data, it's opportunities. It's opportunity to grow for companies, and it's threats, right? It's kind of handling the risks and managing threats before something disastrous happens, right? Is this you find as a major kind of motivation or moving driver for companies to start looking more into dark data?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, companies that are planning oriented are going to jump all over this, and they're going to match it to their opportunities and threats that they've already identified. And really smart companies are going to look for those black swans where it doesn't match, and they're going to say, oops, maybe we better look at this. Reactive companies, they're going to use it a little bit different way. They're going to sense some patterns and say, oops, we need to do something about this, and we better do it fast. Hopefully they've got some guidance while they're doing it fast, but sometimes they'll do it fast and make a mistake and fix it. So there are companies that have very much a do it, try it, fix it approach that believe if you don't make dust, you eat it.
That's a good one. That's a great stopping point. So we're going to pause the conversation until next time. Thank you, Jim, so much for this today. Thank you.
Thank you.